Jensen Huang sells the chips that AI runs on. In the 3 months to April, his company reported more than $80 billion in revenue. 3 months. And on July 24th, he posted on X for the first time in his life to argue that some of the most powerful AI models should be given away, free, for anyone to download anywhere in the world. That post has been seen more than 60 million times. Before it, he had never posted at all. This is how his post opened. For my first post, I'm sharing a letter Nvidia signed on why open models matter. And this is how it ended. The world needs both frontier closed models and frontier open models. The letter is called Open Weights and American AI Leadership. When it went live, it had 25 signatures. 6 days later, it had more than 230. And look at who was missing on day one. OpenAI, Google, Amazon, Anthropic. 4 of the biggest names in American AI all sat it out. Today, Google has signed. OpenAI has signed. Amazon has signed. One name is still not on it. We'll come back to that. Their reason is more interesting than you'd expect. But first, what does giving away a model actually mean? Because that phrase is doing a lot of work. When people call a model open, they mean one specific thing. You can download the weights. The weights are the model. Not a website you log into, not an app that talks to someone else's computer. The actual file, the finished thing, sitting on your own machine. You can read it, change it, run it with the internet unplugged. Nobody can take it back. That is the difference between renting intelligence and owning a copy. The letter's argument starts somewhere you might not expect, in the 1980s. In the 1980s, early open-source software pioneers challenged the prevailing belief that software would advance only if companies kept tight control over their code. Those pioneers lost that argument at the time. Then, they won it so completely that most of the internet now runs on the free software they wrote. The signatories say AI is at the same fork. Open models let a hospital or a small company build on advanced AI without paying frontier prices every single time they use it. Frontier is the industry's word for the most capable models on the market. And openness, they argue, makes systems safer rather than weaker, because anyone can inspect a model that anyone can download. To their credit, they say the hard part out loud too. In the letter's own words, open weights carry real and distinct risks. And once released, the weights are beyond the original developer's control. Now, the name still missing, Anthropic. They are not the villain here. 3 days after the letter, their chief executive Dario Amodei published his reasoning. Anthropic has never advocated for a ban on open models, he wrote. And open models without dangerous capabilities are, in his words, a public good. His objection is narrower and sharper. He does not accept that open models necessarily make safeguards easier to build. And he does not accept that giving everyone the same capabilities necessarily helps defenders more than attackers. That word, necessarily, is the whole disagreement. Not never, not ban it, just you haven't proved it always works that way. Hold on to that. 2 days before that first post, Jensen sat down with Axios and said the quiet part in plain language. Free AI should be great for hardware. Free AI should be great for chips. Free AI should be great for data centers. You should hear the incentive in that sentence. He sells the hardware. He sells the chips. He sells the machines that fill the data centers. This is not a neutral observer telling you free AI is wonderful. This is the person who profits if you believe him. So let's not take his word for it. Let's check. His argument goes like this. Make the model free and more people build with it. More people building means more people using it. And here is the part of his argument most people miss. Building a model is a one-time cost. Using it never stops. Nvidia's case is that over time, running the model needs far more computing power than building it ever did. He thinks the market has now made the same mistake twice. When the Chinese lab DeepSeek released a cheap, powerful model in early 2025, chip stocks fell. When another Chinese lab, Moonshot, released Kimi K3 in July of 2026, they fell again. Both times the reasoning was identical. If AI is getting cheap, the expensive machinery must be worth less. The market misunderstood the impact of DeepSeek the first time, he told Axios. Wall Street, he said, misunderstood the impact of Kimi again this time. That is a real, checkable claim, and it comes with a test built in. If cheap AI destroys the need for expensive computers, then computers should be getting cheaper. So let's follow the money. 6 links, from the words on your screen to the concrete in the ground. If he's wrong, one of them has to be cracking. Start with usage. 2 years ago, Google's AI systems handled about 9.7 trillion chunks of text a month. This May, that number was 3.2 quadrillion, roughly 330 times more in 24 months. And Google says it still cannot keep up with demand. That usage has to run on something. In the 3 months to April, Nvidia's data center business brought in $75 billion, up 92% in a year. Its finance chief credited the inflection in inference demand. Inference is the industry's word for using a model, as opposed to building one. Every chip needs memory sitting right beside it, and that is where the strain shows most. Micron is one of only 3 companies on Earth that makes this memory. In its quarter to late May, it took in $41 billion. 85 cents of every one of those dollars was gross profit. What's left after the cost of actually making the chips? Their own words, they do not have line of sight as to when memory supply will be able to catch up with increasing demand. They expect it to stay tight past 2027. Then comes the step where memory gets bonded to the processor, an unglamorous piece of manufacturing called packaging. Here is the chief executive of TSMC, the company that makes most of the world's advanced chips. Our packaging capacity is so tight that now it limits my customer's growth. He is so short of capacity that he publicly welcomed a competitor. And all of it has to go somewhere physical. 10 megawatts is roughly the power of a small town. Nvidia says the number of its partner sites drawing that much nearly doubled in a year. There are now more than 80. And between them, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, and Meta spent on the order of $160 billion on construction and equipment in a single quarter. Inference got about 60% cheaper per chunk of text in 6 months. Nvidia says so itself. And in the year to April, its revenue rose 85%. So, the test. An Nvidia H100 is a chip released 4 years ago. By May, renting one cost about 20% more than it did in January. That is Nvidia's own figure. If cheap AI were destroying demand for the machines, 4-year-old machines would be getting cheaper. They were getting more expensive. So the test comes back on his side. This is exactly where his argument would break first, and it doesn't. That is the strongest thing anyone can say in his favor. Now let me tell you what he leaves out. In late July, chip stocks fell hard, worse than they fell for Kimi, about 16% in a week. But read why. The analysts quoted at the time called it less about weakening AI demand and more about a repricing of expectations. In plain English, nobody thinks people will use less AI. They think the share price got ahead of the business. And the trigger wasn't a cheap Chinese model at all. It was Google announcing it would spend more. So the fear has changed shape. The question is no longer whether people will use AI, it's whether this much spending ever pays for itself. And that fear has receipts. Amazon's free cash flow is the cash left after it pays for everything it is building. It went from plus $18 billion to minus $7.6 billion. Amazon says that is because of AI. Then there's CoreWeave, one of the new AI cloud companies. In the first 3 months of this year, it reported $99 billion of work booked for the future. Its own measure, broader than signed contracts, and a gigawatt of live power already running. In that same quarter, it lost $740 million. More than 500 million of that was interest. At the end of July, the chip stocks were still about 20% below their June high. I'm not going to tell you they bounced right back. They didn't. And here is the honest center of this story. Not one company in that chain says any of this is because of open models. I went looking. I went through Nvidia's entire earnings call, and TSMC's, the analyst questions too. Then I counted how many times anyone said open source, open weights, DeepSeek or Llama. 0. Not once in either call. The man making this argument does not say it on his own earnings call. One more fact cuts against him. If AI were really spreading to everyone, you'd expect Nvidia's customers to spread out too. They concentrated. In its April quarter, 3 customers accounted for 54% of its revenue, up from 30% a year earlier. So what can we actually say? That AI got dramatically cheaper, usage went up hundreds of times over, and every physical layer underneath it is still short. That much is measured, in earnings reports and company filings, by the companies themselves. Whether open models caused it, nobody has measured, including Nvidia. Remember Anthropic's word? Necessarily. This is the same shape of objection, pointed at a different claim. Nobody is saying Jensen is wrong. They're saying nobody has proved him right yet. Which leaves an obvious question. If nobody can prove it pays, why is anyone still betting on it? There is one group for whom this was never about stock prices. Countries. Say your government runs its hospitals, its courts, and its defense on somebody else's AI. And that AI lives on a server in another country. You don't own it, you can't inspect it, you can't run it disconnected. And if a company changes its terms, or a government changes its export rules, it can be taken away. Open weights are the only version where the thing you depend on is actually yours. Which is why the word Jensen used in his very first post was sovereignty. There is real money moving on that argument, though Nvidia has never broken out how much of it runs open models. It told investors its sovereign business, selling to nations building their own AI, passed $30 billion last year. Though notice which nations. The ones Nvidia's finance chief named were Canada, France, the Netherlands, Singapore, and the United Kingdom. All wealthy. Sovereign AI today is mostly rich countries buying independence. Everybody else getting a turn is still a promise, not a receipt. So why believe a promise like that? Here's the reason, and it isn't a sentimental one. A charity gets cancelled next quarter. A strategy that pays does not. Nvidia isn't giving AI away out of generosity. It's giving AI away because it believes that is how the market grows, and that self-interest is exactly what makes it durable. Nobody has to keep being kind for this to continue. They only have to keep being right. And that puts a flaw on the people who never had one. The hospital that could never train its own model. The startup that could never afford top-of-the-market AI. The country that would rather own its intelligence than rent it. Cheap is not the consolation prize here. Cheap is how a technology stops belonging only to whoever can afford it. It happened once already. Those pioneers in the 80s that everybody thought were naive, most of the internet runs on what they gave away. That's not a footnote to this boom. That is the shape of it.